During a $50,000 deal, my partner said, "I'm taking all the credit." I exposed his lies. His career came crashing down. You ever trust someone so much, only to find out they're the kind of person who'll gut you the second it's convenient for them? That's what happened to me. My name's Amos, and this is the story of how my business partner, Caden, tried to screw me out of a $50,000 deal, and how I destroyed his career because of it. I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's not glamorous, lots of farmland, lots of old-fashioned small-town vibes. I wasn't born into money. My parents worked themselves into the ground just to keep food on the table, and by the time I was 12, I was picking up odd jobs to help out. Fixing lawnmowers, building computers from scrap parts, that kind of thing. If something was broken, people knew to call me. I didn't have much of a social life, and that followed me into adulthood. By the time I was in my late 20s, I had a decent one-man operation fixing gadgets and small electronics. I wasn't rich, but I was proud of what I'd built. Then, one day, this guy named Caden walked into my shop. He wasn't from around here. You could tell just by looking at him: designer shoes, perfectly styled hair, the kind of cologne that smelled like it cost more than my monthly rent. He told me he'd recently moved to Lancaster to start fresh after some bad business dealings in the city. He said he wanted to partner up with someone local who had technical skills because he saw potential in the market. I didn't know what to make of him, but he had this way of talking that made you want to believe him. So, after a few meetings and brainstorming sessions, we decided to team up. We called the business Pinnacle Solutions. It was fancy, sleek, and professional, nothing like the dusty little repair shop I'd been running before. Caden was the face of the company, handling client meetings, pitches, and networking. I was the brains, designing and building everything behind the scenes. It worked. For a while. A couple of years in, things were steady, but we hadn't landed any big contracts yet. Then we got the call. Martina DuPont, a high-end realtor from Philadelphia, wanted to hire us to outfit her luxury properties with smart home systems. It was a huge deal, $50,000 up front, with the potential for referrals to her wealthy clients if we did a good job. This wasn't just a payday, it was an opportunity to break into a new market and take Pinnacle Solutions to the next level. The thing about Martina was that she was extremely demanding. She wanted cutting-edge technology, everything custom-built to her specifications, and zero room for error. Caden was great at dealing with her because he knew how to charm people like her. I handled the hard part, designing and building the systems. For weeks, I worked 12-hour days testing software, calibrating devices, and troubleshooting every possible issue that could come up. By the time the installation date rolled around, I was running on fumes, but I was confident we'd nailed it. The night before the big installation, Caden and I were in the office going over final details. Well, I was. He was scrolling on his phone, looking like he didn't have a care in the world. Eventually, he leaned back in his chair and said, "So, I've been thinking." I didn't even look up. About what? "When Martina pays tomorrow, I think it makes sense for me to take the credit for this one," he said casually, like he was suggesting we order pizza for dinner. That got my attention. "What?" "You know," he said, leaning forward like he was explaining something obvious. "She's my client. I'm the one who landed the deal. You're great at the technical stuff, but let's be honest, you're not exactly the kind of guy who can sell a vision. I am. So, I'll handle the presentation tomorrow, and you can just, hang back." I just stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. Hang back? "Caden, I built this entire system. You haven't touched a single wire. And I don't need to," he said, grinning like he was proud of himself. "That's the beauty of our partnership. You do the tech, I do the people. Look, I'm just saying, for the sake of appearances, it makes sense for me to take the lead on this." "For the sake of appearances?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Are you kidding me? You're asking me to let you take all the credit for my work." "I'm not asking," he said, his tone shifting. "I'm telling you how it's going to be. You don't have the charisma to deal with clients like Martina. You'll just screw it up. So let me handle this, and we'll both benefit." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't a partnership anymore, it was a power grab. I spent the rest of the night fuming, replaying the conversation in my head and thinking about all the ways I'd been blind to who Caden really was. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to let him get away with it. If he wanted to take credit for my work, he was going to have to explain how he did it. I compiled every document, every design, every email exchange that showed exactly what I'd done to make the project happen. Then I waited. Martina arrived at the property around noon, dressed to the nines and ready to be impressed. Caden greeted her like they were old friends, laying on the charm so thick it made my stomach turn. He started walking her through the house, showing off the voice-activated lights, the automated blinds, and the sleek security system. I hung back, letting him dig his own grave. As they reached the living room, Martina turned to me and said, "So, Amos, tell me about your role in all of this." Before I could answer, Caden jumped in. "Amos handles the tech side of things. He's great at following my vision. That was it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't holding back anymore. Actually, I said, stepping forward, everything you see here? That's my work. The designs, the programming, the testing, it's all me. Caden didn't even know how half of this stuff worked until yesterday. Martina raised an eyebrow and looked at Caden. Is that true? Caden stammered, well, I mean, I'm more of the big picture guy. You mean the guy who takes credit for other people's work? I cut him off. Martina wasn't stupid. She could see what was happening, and she did not look happy. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled out my tablet and started showing her the documentation I'd prepared. Blueprints, emails, troubleshooting logs, everything. By the time I was finished, Caden looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. Martina didn't say much after I showed her the proof. She just gave Caden this look, like he was a piece of gum stuck to her shoe. Then she turned to me and said, Amos, you've done excellent work here. I'll make sure the payment is in your name. Caden looked like someone had punched him in the gut. He opened his mouth to argue, but Martina cut him off. Save it, she snapped. You should be ashamed of yourself. After that, the installation went smoothly. Martina walked through the house, asking me questions about the system and complimenting my attention to detail. Caden just stood there, silent, his face getting redder by the second. By the time Martina left, he was fuming. You just had to humiliate me, didn't you? He spat as soon as she was gone. I didn't even look at him. You did that to yourself. That could have been the end of it, but Caden wasn't the kind of guy to take a loss gracefully. A few days later, I started hearing rumors. Apparently, he'd been telling people in town that I was impossible to work with and that he was the real brains behind Pinnacle Solutions. He was trying to salvage his reputation by throwing me under the bus. At first, I thought about letting it go. I figured his lies would catch up with him eventually. But then I found out he was trying to poach our smaller clients, offering them discounted rates if they followed him to a new company he was planning to start. That was the last straw. If Caden wanted war, I was ready. I still had the dossier I'd made for Martina. I updated it with even more evidence, emails where Caden lied about his contributions, texts where he badmouthed me, and recordings of him taking credit for my work in meetings. Then I compiled a list of everyone we'd ever worked with, clients, suppliers, even potential leads. One by one, I sent them the dossier, along with a polite note explaining the situation. The response was immediate, and brutal. Martina must have talked, because within days, word had spread through the local business community. Caden's name was mud. Clients who had been on the fence about working with us chose to stay with me. Potential investors stopped returning his calls. Even his personal connections seemed to distance themselves. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to a friend of mine who worked in tech security. With his help, I found out that Caden had been using some shady accounting practices, like skimming money from smaller deals and forgetting to log certain expenses. Nothing outright illegal, but definitely unethical. I sent that information to a local business blog, and they ran a story about it. The headline? Former partner of Pinnacle Solutions caught in ethical scandal. That was the final nail in the coffin. Caden tried to fight back, of course. He posted on social media about how I was vindictive and trying to ruin his life. But no one believed him. I didn't even have to respond, his reputation was already destroyed. Eventually, he stopped posting altogether. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that he'd packed up and moved out of town. Last I checked, he was working at some chain electronics store in a mall, selling phone cases and troubleshooting printer issues for minimum wage. Meanwhile, Pinnacle Solutions thrived. I rebranded the company, hired a small team of people I could trust, and expanded into new markets. Martina became one of my best clients, and she referred me to several of her high-profile contacts. Within a year, I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed of, and I did it on my own terms.